Alright, here we go again. In this movie, I'm going to go over an alternative to binding skin depending on the type of character you're modeling. In this scene, this is the scene that I used in the last movie where we did the smooth bind of the skeleton, as you can see by the multicolored skeleton. The reason I have this open is I want you to notice in this shoulder area, when we rotate it, you can see that it deforms a bit. Or if I were to grab, say, this one and arch his back, you can really see it stretches out his abdomen. And it just deforms him. Now, thinking about the subject matter itself, I should probably also point out the foot, when you move it away, it also deforms. Now, thinking about the subject matter, if this is a wooden artist dummy, hopefully you've all seen those, it shouldn't deform. Really, the forearm should pivot around the elbow. Since it's made out of wood, it's not going to stretch at all. So now I'm going to go ahead and open a scene, let's see, that I put together a little bit earlier here. Okay, so it's the same dummy, and all I've done was I put in a skeleton, which is slightly different. And first thing we're going to go over is a little bit of organization here. I'm going to open up my channel box, and in the bottom right corner here you can see it says layer 1. I'm going to also grab my outliner, so you can go to window outliner, or mine was just hanging out off the screen there. I've got this scene particularly broken down into the dummy geometry, so that's what's in the dummy geo group, and the skeleton. So I'm actually just going to highlight this group. Basically I want all of the geometry and not the skeleton. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go over to layer 1. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down to add selected objects. Okay, so what I've done is it's similar to like Photoshop or InDesign, where you've got different layers you can turn on and off. This just makes it easier if I don't want to work in X-ray mode. I can just shut off the geometry and then I don't have to worry about it. It's still there, it will still render, but it will not, sorry, it won't render. I can't speak today. So you got to make sure and turn that back on before you render your output, but you'd probably do that in this case anyway. I'm going to name this, I'm going to double click the layer and I'm just going to name it dummy_geo. Okay. Oh, it's telling me I can't name it dummy_geo because I've actually already got a group named that. So we're just going to name it dummy_geo. Okay. I'll go ahead and turn that off. Now I want to grab the skeleton. I'm going to click this little button here. That's going to create a new layer. I'm going to name this skeleton. Actually, I'm going to name this one dummy_skele. Just so if I do add more objects to this scene, I'll be able to tell that this is the dummy skeleton and not maybe some other something skeleton. And since I've got this skeleton selected, I'm going to go ahead, right click on the dummy scale layer and add selected objects. Okay, so now I can turn those on and off. Okay, this second button in the layer palette here is for making templates. If you click it and you see it says a T, that's a templated object. You can't edit that at all. You can't select it. It's just basically the wireframe there for you to model over if you're going to model something that's the same or similar. R is basically the same thing as a templated object, except for instead of wireframing, it's actually filled in. Unless you turn on wireframe mode. Okay. Now into the real fun part. I put X-ray back on by going to shading and down to X-ray. And now what we're going to do is we're going to screw up my lovely little hierarchy system. Now you notice I have all this stuff named. What we're going to do, instead of binding skin, we are going to, we're just going to parent like the chest to one of the joints. Okay, well, the reason you'll notice that this is a little different, I don't have my spine running down the back of my character, because he's actually going to pivot, his chest is going to pivot around this joint. So you'll notice that most of the joints that I'm going to be moving, I have a joint at the bottom of the object that's going to be parented to them. That kind of is hard to explain, but let's go ahead and we'll get into it. The exception to that is this shoulder joint. I had to put a joint in there so I could run bones off the center down to get the shoulders. But, okay, so I can see that this bone that I have selected, if I go down into my hierarchy, I actually named it Skell Chest. You notice all my joints are named S-K-E-L first, so I know that that's part of the skeleton. It's named Skell Chest because I'm going to go ahead and parent the chest to it. So go up and I'm going to middle click and drag the chest down to that particular joint. Now watch what happens. None of the rest of his body is going to move with it just because this is the only piece I have parented so far. But if I go ahead and grab my rotate tool, now you can see that his chest rotates or pivots around this joint. So there's no deforming at all, which is more natural to the actual wooden dummy. So now I'm going to go ahead and let's see, I'm just going to reparent some of these, and then I'm going to come back and I'll kind of show you what I've done. Okay, so let me open my outliner now that I'm done here. You notice that all I have left in my dummy geo group is some empty groups, and I didn't do the legs yet, but I kind of wanted to give you kind of an example of what I did. Now, essentially all I did was middle click and drag objects from the dummy group where I know I had my geometry down into the skeletons. So I don't have anything under hips left or right. I do have the stuff here. Okay, so I have a lot of stuff in here. If you look under skeleton neck, when I highlight it, that's this joint right here, I have the crown of his head, which is that joint above, and I also put the neck and the head. So the reason I put the head and neck under this same joint is when I rotate this joint, I want the head to move. The head is basically going to rotate around the neck. So you can see that when I select that joint and rotate it, the head indeed moves. Same for like the shoulder. Well, the shoulder itself, the shoulder geometry, I have parented to this group in the middle because it's not really going to rotate around anything. But if I select the shoulder joint, you can see that I open up my skeleton shoulder joint, left side, and I've got the elbow and everything below the elbow, which is in that hierarchy. I've got the bicep and the elbow, which are parented directly to the shoulder. Now, the reason I did it that way is the bicep is going to pivot directly around the shoulder. So when I move the shoulder, it rotates the arm and the rest of the arm. Along with the elbow is attached to that. Pretty much anything that is a joint, like the elbow itself, I will take the geometry and parent it to whatever the piece, like whatever the bicep is parented to. That way when I grab the elbow joint, I get everything further out than the joint itself. So I parented the forearm to the elbow joint. I parented the wrist to the elbow joint as well. So, mind you, the way skeletons work, everything, it will select everything further down in the hierarchy. So when I grab the shoulder, it automatically will select the rest of the arm. This is kind of confusing, but you kind of just have to play around with it and see what happens when you parent different things to what. I don't know if there's any better way I can explain it. If you have any questions, go ahead and just leave a comment. Other than that, good luck.